So, it's that time of year again where I start to make my reindeers. I take this block that I've got that's already marked out and templated with a reindeer already on it. I'll mark that on top of this beautiful piece of yew. I'll mark it both ends and then I'll run a ruler across to get my width. Now, this piece of wood should give me 4 reindeers. It's slightly too wide at the moment, but you'll see in a second I'll run that through the table saw and trim it to size. So let's start with a little bit of dust extraction. Switching on the CamVac, both motors. I'm now going to adjust the fence on the table saw to the line that we just marked. Now the blade on the table saw isn't quite high enough, even at its maximum height, so I'll simply flip this over and make the cut in 2 passes. So we now have our 2 pieces. The depth of the reindeer is spot on, but the width is slightly too wide, so I'll run those through the table saw again. But first of all, I'm going to put the air filter on to get rid of some of this dust that's in the atmosphere. So as I mentioned, this second piece is slightly too wide, so I run it through the table saw again with 2 passes. Just look at that dust coming off the back of it. You can see why I've got the extractor and the air filter on. The piece that comes off is quite satisfying. It's probably about 1 mil thick. It would make an ideal veneer actually. Just look at that. So we now have our 2 pieces. I'll get 2 reindeers out of each, but they are still slightly too wide. So I'm going to put the template on top, mark it and run them through the table saw and take them down to width. I'm just going to adjust the height of the blade. I never have it higher than it actually needs to be. So that's the first piece cut to width. Now over to the second piece, and this has worked out quite well because it means I can cut off these rough edges. As nice as they are, they're no good because it needs to be exactly square. So we've now got 2 really nice pieces, and I've also got some really nice offcuts which go in the offcut pile. Next, I'll mark out the length of the reindeers and cut the wood to size. It's then over to the miter saw where I cut them to 4 equal lengths. So I've now got my 4 pieces of wood all cut to equal sizes, but the first thing I need to do is change the blade in the bandsaw. I've currently got a 1/4 of an inch blade in there, but I'm going to change it to a blade that is 1/8 of an inch, or roughly 3 millimeters. Now this is a process that takes a little while. It takes me about 10 to 15 minutes, so I'm going to speed this process up for you. So as I say, this is a really narrow blade. It's about 3 millimeters or 1/8 of an inch. These are quite hard to find, these blades, but I found a company on the internet that make the blades to order. You just give them the size that you want and you tell them what machine you've got, and they make a blade to exactly that size for you and then send it out to you in the post. Okay, so let's speed this part of the video up for you. So the blade's now on, it's on both wheels. I apply a little bit of tension at a time. Keep turning the wheel, then apply some more tension to make sure the blade is sitting smack bang in the middle of the wheel on the rubbers. Again, a little bit of tension, make sure it's sitting where it should be. And then it's a case of adjusting all the guides. There's guides at the top, there's guides at the bottom. I've put a piece of cardboard there, as you can see, so you can see exactly what I'm adjusting. And then the wheels at the bottom and the guides. And then we're pretty much done. So now it's time to test it. Let's close both the doors. The wheels are flowing nice and freely, but let's see what it's like when we switch it on. It should be okay, but you never know. Tools out of the way, and let's give it a go. Yeah, that's good. I'm pleased with that. Now, I'm not sure if you can see this. I should have zoomed in a little bit, but as I mentioned, the blade is approximately 3mm or 1/8 of an inch. Okay, so let's get back to making these reindeers. I've now got to template these. I've got a template that I made out of MDF a while back. I just laid it on top of the block. I'll mark out the top first of all using a nice thick black marker. You want something that's going to stand out so you can see it nice and easily when you're cutting on the saw. As I say, you do the top first of all, like I am now, and then I need to cut out this side profile. Now it's important to remember which way up. I've done this so many times and got it wrong. This is the correct way. It doesn't look right, but it is, because we're going to cut this part out first of all. This will all make sense in a second when I start to cut out. So I shall mark out all 4 at once. I shall do 2 going one way and 2 going the other. This will make sense in a second. So you'll have 2 reindeers facing one way and 2 facing the other. Now it's over to the bandsaw. Right, now for the exciting part, cutting out the reindeers. Now I really enjoy doing these. It takes a little bit of getting used to with a narrow blade like this, but it's certainly a lot easier than cutting with a regular blade, because some of these bends and turns are really quite tight. So that's the first section cut out. Now on to the next bit, which is the legs going up into the belly and under his nose. The next section is to cut out the antlers, and all of these sections that are removed have to be kept. This isn't actual speed, by the way. I've sped this up. So, as I say, we need to keep these bits. They'll slot back in like that for now. But for a more permanent fixture and to keep them nice and solid, I'm using carpet tape. It's double-sided, and I'm going to stick each piece back in where it originally was. I guess really I could use any double-sided tape, but I do like using this stuff. It's ultra sticky, and I can't afford for these pieces to move when I make the second cut. So here goes. Now going to cut the front of the reindeer out. Start off with the antlers. This is the tricky part. As you can hear, I've just put on the air filter and a dust extractor to try and get as much of this dust away as possible. I've also lowered the blade slightly. The closer the blade to the wood, the better the cut and the more accurate. Now, this isn't actual speed. I've sped this up quite a bit. I'm going to start off by cutting out this side, and then when I move on to the other side, I will make that in 2 cuts. You'll see why. It's because to turn the blade into this part would be quite tricky. So I'll just do it in 2 cuts instead. Turn the piece around and then go back in this way, swoop round, and that makes things a lot easier. Then I move on to the antlers. I have to be careful with these because they're quite thin at the top, but do it all in one go. One sweep all the way around and back out again. And all that remains are the legs. Again, all in one cut. Quite tight, but as I say, the blade makes easy work of this. And that's it. Now all I've got to do is take the other sections out that I'd stuck on. The legs, middle section, really sticky, but it needs to be because you can't afford for it to move when you're cutting. And then the antlers, and this bit I have to be a little bit careful because these are quite narrow. But there we have it, one bandsaw reindeer. Now over to the sander. I'll start off with the bobbin sander and I'll do the legs. Now on the other reindeers that I've made, I've changed them slightly and made the legs slightly wider apart so that I can get the bobbin sander in and out. It makes life a lot easier. But this works for now. So I'll do this section first of all, and the antlers. And then I change the sander over to more like a belt sander and do the large flat surfaces. As you can see, it's really, really dusty. Good job for the extraction. You can see the extraction working, pulling the dust around the back of the sander. And then the sides. There's quite a bit of sanding on these. This is probably the bit that takes the longest, especially when I then have to sand these by hand afterwards to a finer grit. Now again, this isn't at actual speed. I've sped this up on purpose because watching someone sanding can be a little bit boring. There's lots of sanding. So many little bits you've got to sand. And if you don't, the finish isn't great, especially when you put a finish on them. So this one's almost done. But I made 6 in total, so I must have spent about an hour and a half just sanding these. And then once they're done, it's a case of sanding them by hand. Now I sand these with 2 grits, 180 to start with, and then I finish on 240. There's no need to go any finer than that because they're going to get a coat at a minute of lacquer. I've done these in a number of ways. I've finished them with Danish oil, I've finished them with wax oil, and I've also sprayed them. The spray is quite effective and is quite possibly the easiest way of doing it. But there we go. For now, there's 6 reindeers all cut out and all sanded, ready to have a finish applied. Now, as I say, there's a number of ways of finishing these, but I'm going to finish these quite possibly the easiest way, which is with a spray can. Now, this is an acrylic gloss lacquer. I find this really easy and really simple to do. You can't do it all at once because you've got to hold the thing and you can't afford to have fingerprints in the lacquer. But if you hold them at the top by the antlers, you can get most of it done. And they take a couple of coats anyway. I give them a light sanding in between. I give them 3 coats in total. But I think that's quite effective and I think they look quite good. And there we have 6 finished reindeers, all with their new gloss coats. They've had 3 coats of acrylic gloss lacquer. That's it, all done. As always, thank you for watching and I'll see you all again soon.